Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Claudia Walks. If you're new here, welcome, and also consider subscribing. It's free. So on today's video, we are diving deep into a very interesting topic. What role did the Arabs play during the Atlantic slave trade? And guys, when we think of the Atlantic slave trade, our minds often focuses on the horrific journeys across the Middle Passage, the role of European colonizers, and the suffering of African slaves. But whatever I tell you, there are other groups or another groups with deep ties to this dark chapter in the history. So today let's explore the role Arabs played during this time of Atlantic slave trade. So guys, first let's clarify. Arabs were more directly involved in the trans-Saharan slave trade, which predated and operated alongside the Atlantic slave trade. And from the 17th century onwards, the Arabs merchants established a fast network that transported enslaved Africans across the Saharan Desert to North Africa and also the Middle East. And these routes also provided a template for European traders who later expanded the trade across the Atlantic. So the question is, how did the Arabs connect to the Atlantic slave trade? And the answer lies in their relationships with the African rulers. And many African kingdoms, especially in Sahel region, worked with Arabs merchants to capture and sell slaves. And the same African intermediaries later dealt with European traders, creating a supply chain that crossed from the Sahara to the Atlantic coast. And also, it's also important to recognize the economic role Arabs played. Their demand for the enslaved labor in the Middle East sustained the trans-Saharan trade, which drained African societies of millions of people. And this weakened many communities, making them more vulnerable to exploitations by European powers during the Atlantic slave trade. And even though Arabs were not shipping enslaved Africans across the Atlantic, their historical actions shaped the groundworks for this atrocity. And the legacy of Arab involvement in African slavery, both direct and indirect, continue to spark debate about accountability and historical justice. So the Atlantic slave trade was a tragedy with many players and layers. And by understanding the role Arabs played, we gain a fuller picture of how such a devastating system could operate for centuries. So let's continue to learn, reflect, and share these stories to ensure history is never forgotten. So from the 7th century through the 19th century, the Arabs dominated trans-Saharan and Indian Ocean slave trades, moved like an estimated people, about 18 million, men, women, and children. And many were used as domestic servants, soldiers, and laborers. And this fast and deeply entrenched system influenced the scale and the logistics of this slave trade. And also, it's very crucial to note that Arab traders were not limited to the Sahara Desert. Along the East African coast, they played a major role in the Indian Ocean slave trade, where enslaved Africans were shipped to the Middle East India, and also beyond. And some of these trade networks eventually connected with the Europeans controlled Atlantic system. And while the scale of the Atlantic slave trade far exceeded that of the Arab dominated systems, the connections are undeniable. Arabs matured helped to establish the infrastructure, trade routes, relationship with African rulers, and the systems of human commodification. The Europeans exploited when they began their transatlantic operations. And today, many descendants of those affected by the slave trade are asking critical questions. Who should take responsibility? How do we address the shared complicity of various groups, from Arab traders to African rulers and to also European colonizers? Those are complex questions, but they are necessary to fully reckon with this history. And despite centuries of exploitation, African cultures endured and adapted. And the descendants of those who were enslaved also have created a vibrant, resilient communities worldwide, continuing to honor their ancestors' legacy of strength and also survival. So guys, understanding history requires exploring every facet, no matter how uncomfortable. And the role of Arabs in the Atlantic slave trade is a part of this broader story. Let's commit to learning, sharing, and also challenging the narratives that have shaped our world. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Let's keep the conversation alive. Also comment down below. Let me know what you think about this Atlantic slave trade, and also add more about the role Arabs played into this journey. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.